reactions.
Goldsmith decided to deliver the bad news in person. He drove the 6 blocks to the White House with Deputy Attorney General Patrick Philbin.
And on the way over there, he said to me, "They're going to be mad. They've never been told no before." And he was right. I announced the conclusion. Gonzalez asked me 3 or 4 questions. I walked him through the legal analysis. He didn't ask me any questions after that. I received my first broadside from David Addington.
And Addington has thought it through. He's ready for the fight. And it is a fight.
Addington angrily argued an earlier presidential decision denying al-Qaeda Geneva protections should apply in Iraq.
I was a little bit unprepared for the vehemence of the reaction.
He essentially says, are you with us or are you against us?
They're both very, very smart and very, very stubborn. But neither one of them would ever climb down from a firmly held view.
And Addington was well known for his temper.
He's very gruff and incredibly forceful behind doors in meetings.
He can go from mild to hot pretty quickly, and he's sarcastic, and he makes effective use of sarcasm and his own great intelligence and his ability to put people down to wield a pretty sharp knife in small meetings.
And he acted with the implicit blessing of the Vice President. So all of these things made him a very, very forceful presence. But most of Addington's power vis-a-vis me was basically in the bluster and the yelling and the bringing arguments to my attention.
Addington and Cheney were forced to comply with Jack Goldsmith's decision. The Geneva Convention would now apply to all Iraqis. Back at the Justice Department, it was time for Jack Goldsmith to be shown the most closely held secrets.
He's handed this stack of letters that John Yoo has written authorizing or permitting all sorts of government activities.
My reaction on being briefed into these programs was at first to be struck by how much more was going on and how much more intense and serious and controversial the war on terrorism was than I realized based on my previous experiences.
Goldsmith was one of the first outsiders to read the memos written by his friend John Yoo. To his surprise, they placed almost no limits on the power of the president.
I knew that there were big problems. I thought that there were errors in some of the legal arguments, sometimes bad errors. I thought that there were extravagant and unnecessary claims of presidential power.
He took a look at a few things that had been authorized and basically said, "Oh my God, I cannot believe they're doing this," and said, "You got to stop right away."
One of the programs was authorized by John Yoo right after 9/11. It was the centerpiece of intelligence gathering in the war on terror.
It was a very closely held secret. It was, very, very, very few people in the Department of Justice knew about this.
They called it the crown jewel.
They began to spy on Americans in an unprecedented way, in a way that they never had done before, by creating a special program to eavesdrop on Americans without warrants on their international phone calls, and also by mounting a massive data mining operation.
The data from billions of telephone calls and emails were being captured by the National Security Agency. But in the 1970s, Congress had prohibited such activities without the approval of a special court.
The initial justification legally comes from yet another memo by John Yoo, in which he says that Congress may no more regulate the president's gathering of intelligence against enemies than it can decide where he deploys troops on the battlefield.
If it's part of the president's power as a constitutional matter to gather intelligence, including intercepting communications, then that's a power that's included, and Congress can't seize it just because it wants to.
The program was top secret when Jack Goldsmith decided to review it.
It's the most important thing during my time in government, and it is central to the government's counterterrorism policy, so the stakes are enormous.
Once again, Goldsmith couldn't support the administration.
I went as far as I could, but at some point the legal arguments just ran out.
Goldsmith took his concerns to James Comey, a former U.S. attorney who was second in command at Justice.
Goldsmith and Comey were kindred spirits. They understood that their job was to uphold the law.
Goldsmith delivers this legal opinion. Comey decides that he has a real problem with this NSA program, and he tells Ashcroft, and Ashcroft agrees with him.
Attorney General John Ashcroft was supposed to sign a reauthorization of the program every 45 days, and for 2 years he had. But now he balked.
And they're waiting for the deadline for the reauthorization, and then Ashcroft gets sick.
He's so sick, so ill that he has to lie down on the floor. He's on the verge of passing out. He has to be hospitalized.
It was acute pancreatitis, severe enough that James Comey became the acting Attorney General. He will decide whether to reauthorize the surveillance program.
And he decides he can't reauthorize it the way it exists.
But Addington, Cheney, and the President fought back. Alberto Gonzales and Chief of Staff Andy Card went to Ashcroft's hospital room.
Deputy Chief of Staff Jim Comey gets word that Alberto Gonzales and Andrew Card are on the way to see Ashcroft.
And Comey gets his car and his security detail, and they rush to the hospital to try and beat him there.
It was the evening, about 8 o'clock, and I got a call from the Justice Department Command Center. And so I rushed to the hospital, double parked, ran up the stairs.
Ashcroft's own wife doesn't want the White House men to come barging in there.
He had tubes going in and out of him. He looked ashen, and I actually thought he looked near death. I thought he looked just terrible. In walked Alberto Gonzales, the White House counsel, and Andrew Card, the President's Chief of Staff.
They would have to know that a healthy John Ashcroft would oppose them. They would know that.
Judge Gonzales had an envelope in his hand, and it became apparent that he was there to ask the Attorney General to authorize this program. Attorney General Ashcroft kind of lifted himself, he arose from the bed, kind of lifted himself up, and gave about a 2 or 3 minute speech, or talk, or address to Gonzales and Card, in which he basically, I can't get into the details, but he showed enormous, unbelievable clarity about what the issues were and what was going on, and he explained why he also would not approve the program, and he read them a bit of the Riot Act, and then he said, at the end of all this, he said, and in any event, I'm not the Attorney General now, Jim Comey is, because Jim Comey was the acting Attorney General. And with that extraordinary performance, and it was just an amazing, one of the most amazing things I've ever seen in my life, because he went from seeming, near death to having this amazing moment of clarity. And he just, again, receded into the bed. And I really worried at that point that he was going to expire. And, it looked like he gave it the last of his energy. It was an intense, unbelievable scene, and Gonzales and Card quickly left, and that was the end of it.
The next morning, at the urging of his inner circle, President Bush reauthorized the program on his own signature. At the Justice Department, Jack Goldsmith prepared his letter of resignation.
I had drafted my resignation letter and was prepared to resign. And I was sure I was going to resign that day. It was inconceivable to me, based on what had happened the last 2 days, that I wouldn't resign.
As many as 30 other Justice Department employees also threatened to resign, including James Comey, John Ashcroft, and even Robert Mueller, the director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation.
Bush views Mueller as a warrior in the war on terror, in the battle, just like Bush and Cheney are. The rest of them he sees as lawyers, guys who watch the battle. So when Mueller says, ooh, this is about rule of law, and Mr. President, I'll have to resign if you don't make the right choice here, that finally stops Bush.